My name is Nelson Walker, 70 years old and just survived my first heart attack. After 15 days in that sterile hospital room, I was finally heading home to the house I built with my Martha. The taxi dropped me at my own driveway, but something was wrong. There stood Amanda, my daughter-in-law, blocking the entrance with her parents hovering behind her. Her words hit harder than my heart attack. "My parents live here now. Don't be a problem." I just smiled and replied, "Enjoy it while you can." Before I tell you how I turned the tables on them, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how a 70-year-old man got sweet justice without saying a single harsh word. I should probably start from the beginning, so you understand how things got to this point. I'm a retired civil engineer who spent 40 years designing bridges across the country. More important than any bridge I built was the home I created with my own 2 hands for Martha and me back in 1982. Every nail, every board has a memory attached to it. The wraparound porch where Martha and I drank our morning coffee for 38 years. The oak staircase I carved by hand while she was pregnant with our son Thomas. The kitchen with its big bay window overlooking the garden where Martha grew her prize-winning roses. We had a good life, simple but full of love. Thomas was our only child, and I tried to be the kind of father I never had, taking him fishing, teaching him woodworking in my workshop, cheering at every baseball game. Martha and I built our lives around him, and I thought we had raised a strong, independent young man. Martha passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was quick and brutal, taking my best friend of 45 years in just 4 months. The house felt empty without her laughter, without her humming as she moved from room to room. I'd wake up reaching across the bed for her, only to find cold sheets. Thomas was my lifeline during that time, coming by every Sunday for dinner, helping me navigate a world without Martha. That all changed when Amanda entered the picture 5 years ago. I remember the first time Thomas brought her home. She was all smiles and compliments, asking about family photos, seeming interested in our history. Martha was still with us then, already sick but determined to welcome the woman our son seemed to love. "Be patient with her," Martha whispered to me that night. "Something's not quite right there, but Thomas needs to see it for himself." My Martha always could read people better than me. I just saw a pretty young woman who made my son smile. But over time, the real Amanda began to show through those perfect smiles. Thomas stopped coming around as much. When they did visit, she'd make little comments. "This house is so quaint. Don't you think it's time to update things, Nelson?" Or she'd rearrange our family photos when she thought I wasn't looking, pushing Martha's face to the back of the shelf. 2 years ago, about a year after Martha passed, Thomas called with news that hit me like a truck. "Dad, Amanda and I are having some financial problems. We need to move in with you for a little while, just until we get back on our feet." I wanted to help my son, so I said yes, even though something in my gut told me it was a bad idea. They moved into the guest bedroom upstairs, the one Martha had always kept ready for visitors. Amanda immediately started talking about improvements she wanted to make. New furniture, new paint colors, new everything. I stood my ground on a few things. Martha's garden, my workshop, our bedroom. But I let a lot slide to keep the peace. Slowly, I watched as Thomas changed. The son who used to laugh easily became quiet, deferring to Amanda on everything. He stopped going fishing with me, stopped calling his old friends. When I'd try to talk to him about it, he'd just say, "Amanda thinks." And whatever followed was usually something that pushed me further to the margins of my own home. I kept my thoughts to myself, remembering what Martha had said about Thomas needing to see the truth for himself. I didn't want to risk pushing him away completely, so I learned to live with Amanda's cold stares and Thomas's growing distance. I spent more time in my workshop or tending to Martha's roses, talking to her as if she could hear me through the blooms she'd loved so much. Then came the heart attack. I was out in the garden on a hot July morning, pruning back Martha's white roses. I felt a crushing pain in my chest, like someone had set a boulder on top of me. I remember falling to my knees among the roses, thinking, "Is this how I join you, Martha?" Thomas found me there when he came home for lunch. The next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance, then the hospital. 15 days. That's how long they kept me. Tests, monitors, a small procedure to place a stent. Through it all, Thomas visited exactly twice. Brief, awkward visits where he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. Amanda never came once. Always an excuse. She was busy with work. She had a cold and couldn't risk bringing germs to the hospital. Her parents were visiting. Her parents. That should have been my first clue. In the 5 years Thomas and Amanda had been together, I'd never met her parents. Thomas mentioned they lived in Florida, that they weren't close. Yet suddenly they were important enough for Amanda to skip visiting her father-in-law in the hospital. When the doctor finally cleared me to go home, I called Thomas to come get me. First he didn't answer. Then he texted saying he was stuck at work and couldn't get away. Could I take a taxi? I was confused. My son had always been the first to offer help before Amanda. But I agreed, not wanting to be a burden. So there I was, a 70-year-old heart attack survivor, carrying my small hospital bag to a taxi, giving the driver the address to my own home. As we pulled into the driveway of the house I built, the place where all my memories with Martha lived, I felt a strange sense of foreboding. If only Martha were there to hold my hand and tell me everything would be okay. But she wasn't. And as it turned out, nothing was okay at all. The taxi driver helped me out with my bag, probably noticing how slowly I moved. "You need help to the door, sir?" he asked kindly. "No, thank you," I said, tipping him an extra $10. "My family is waiting for me." Except when I looked toward my front door, the welcoming committee wasn't exactly what I'd expected. Amanda stood firmly in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. Behind her stood an older couple I'd never seen before, though the family resemblance was unmistakable. The woman had Amanda's sharp eyes, the man her prominent chin. "Nelson," Amanda said, not moving from the doorway as I approached. No hug, no welcome home, not even a "how are you feeling?" Just my name, spoken like an accusation. "Amanda," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm home. Is Thomas here?" "Thomas is at work," she said quickly. Then she gestured to the couple behind her. "These are my parents, Harold and Diane. They've come to live with us." I looked past her to the strangers standing in the entrance to the home I built. Harold had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting his weight and avoiding my eyes. Diane, however, matched her daughter's cool stare. "Nice to meet you both," I said, years of Martha's lessons in politeness kicking in. "I didn't realize you were visiting." "Not visiting," Amanda corrected. "Living. They've moved in." I frowned, confused. "I don't understand. We don't have the room for 2 more people." Thomas and I never discussed this. Amanda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've made room. My parents live here now. Don't be a problem." The words hung in the air between us, a clear threat. I felt my recently repaired heart thumping hard in my chest. "May I come into my house?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Amanda stepped aside, just barely enough for me to enter. As I walked in, I froze. The living room I had left 15 days ago was completely transformed. Martha's antique sofa, the one we had saved for 3 years to buy when we were first married, was gone. In its place sat a sleek leather sectional I'd never seen before. The walls, once adorned with family photos and Martha's watercolor paintings, now displayed generic artwork. I turned slowly, taking it all in. Martha's reading corner, with her favorite chair and the bookshelf I built her for our 20th anniversary, had been replaced by an entertainment center with a massive television. The handmade quilt her grandmother had passed down to her was nowhere to be seen. "Where are all our things?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We redecorated," Amanda said brightly, as if she'd done me a favor. "The place needed updating. It was so cluttered before." "Cluttered," I repeated. That clutter was my life with Martha. Every piece told a story of our years together. "Nelson," Amanda's mother stepped forward, extending her hand as if this were a normal introduction. "I'm Diane. We've heard so much about you. I hope you're feeling better after your hospital stay." I shook her hand automatically, still trying to process what was happening. "And I'm Harold," Amanda's father added, also offering his hand. "Sorry to meet under these circumstances." "What circumstances exactly?" I asked. "I don't understand what's going on in my own home." Amanda sighed theatrically. "We needed to make room for my parents. The doctor said you shouldn't be climbing stairs after your heart attack, so we've set you up a nice place in the garden shed. All your personal belongings are there." The garden shed, a 10 by 12 space where I kept tools and garden supplies. No bathroom, no insulation. Just a wooden shed at the back of the property. "You've moved me to the shed?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Just then, I heard the front door open behind me. Thomas walked in, stopping short when he saw me standing there. "Dad," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "You're home. I was going to pick you up tomorrow." "The doctor released me today," I said, searching my son's face for some sign of the boy I raised. "Thomas, what's going on here?" Thomas looked at Amanda, then back at me, guilt written all over his face. Amanda thought it would be best if her parents moved in to help out. "Given your condition." "My condition," I repeated. "I had a heart attack, Thomas. I'm not dying. And I certainly don't need strangers moving into my home." "They're not strangers, they're family," Amanda snapped. "And you need to be reasonable. The doctor said you need a quiet, stress-free recovery environment. So, you put me in the garden shed?" Thomas at least had the grace to look ashamed. "It's just temporary, Dad, until we figure out a better arrangement." I looked at my son, really looked at him. This wasn't the Thomas I raised. This man standing before me, unable to meet my eyes, was a stranger. "I need to speak with you alone," I said to Thomas. Before he could respond, Amanda stepped between us. "Absolutely not. The doctor specifically said to avoid stress and confrontation. Thomas needs to help me get dinner started. You should go rest in your new space and join us later if you're feeling up to it." I wanted to argue. Wanted to remind everyone whose name was on the deed to this house. Wanted to ask what had happened to the son I raised to be honest and respectful. But I felt a twinge in my chest. Not another heart attack, just stress and exhaustion, and knew this wasn't the time to fight. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll go get settled." I turned and walked through the kitchen, also completely redecorated. Martha's yellow walls now a sterile gray, and out the back door to the garden shed. With each step, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on my shoulders. The shed door stuck, as it always had. I gave it a firm push and stepped inside, then stopped cold. The small space was crammed with boxes haphazardly labeled Nelson stuff in Amanda's handwriting. My clothes were stuffed into garbage bags. Martha's photo albums, the ones I looked at every night before bed, were stacked carelessly in a corner, some with bent covers. In one corner, they had set up a narrow cot. Not even a proper bed, just a fold-out camping cot that had been in the attic for years. Beside it sat a small table with a lamp. No bathroom, no privacy. Not even a proper door that locked. I sank down onto the cot, the metal frame creaking under my weight, and put my head in my hands. 15 days ago, I had a heart attack in Martha's garden. Now I had returned to find myself exiled from my own home, relegated to the shed like a piece of unwanted furniture. For the first time since Martha died, I allowed myself to truly cry. Not just for the loss of my home, but for my son who had become a stranger. For the life I had built that was being dismantled piece by piece. As the sun set on my first day home from the hospital, I lay down on that uncomfortable cot, surrounded by the boxed-up remnants of my life, and wondered what Martha would tell me to do now. I woke before dawn, my back aching from the hard cot. For a moment, I was disoriented, expecting to see the familiar walls of my bedroom. Then reality crashed in. The shed, Amanda's coldness, Thomas's betrayal, strangers in my home. I sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in my joints. Sleeping in an unheated shed wasn't ideal for a 70-year-old with heart problems. There was no bathroom in the shed, so I had to make my way back to the house. I knocked lightly on the back door, feeling strange, asking for permission to enter my own home. After a long moment, Thomas opened it, looking surprised to see me. "Dad, you're up early. Need to use the bathroom," I said simply. He stepped aside, guilt flashing across his face. "Of course. Use the one down here. Amanda's parents are using the guest bathroom upstairs now." I nodded and headed to the small half bath off the kitchen. When I emerged, I could smell coffee brewing. Thomas stood awkwardly by the counter. "Want some coffee? I just made it." "That would be nice," I said, taking a seat at the kitchen table. A new glass-topped monstrosity that had replaced Martha's beloved oak table where we'd shared thousands of family meals. Thomas poured me a cup, sliding it across the counter. "How are you feeling? Physically or emotionally?" I asked, watching him flinch slightly. Before he could answer, Amanda swept into the kitchen, already dressed in a crisp business suit despite the early hour. "Oh," she said, spotting me at the table. "You're up. Good morning, Amanda," I said calmly. She ignored my greeting. "Thomas, did you remember to call about the furniture donation pickup? We need to get the rest of those old pieces out of the garage." My heart sank. "What furniture donation?" Amanda barely glanced at me. "Just some old things we're getting rid of, making space. Those wouldn't happen to be our family antiques, would they? The ones that belonged to Martha's grandparents?" Thomas suddenly became very interested in his coffee cup. Amanda sighed dramatically. "Nelson, those pieces were old and outdated. This is our home too, and we need it to function for our lifestyle." "Our home?" I repeated quietly. "Thomas, may I speak with you alone, please?" "He doesn't have time," Amanda interrupted. "We both have to get to work, and you should be resting, not causing drama." "It's not drama to want to speak to my son in my own house," I said, keeping my voice level. Amanda's eyes narrowed. "The doctor specifically said to avoid stress." "This conversation is over." She turned to Thomas. "We're going to be late. Get your things." Like an obedient puppy, Thomas nodded, avoiding my gaze. He grabbed his jacket and briefcase, following Amanda toward the door. "Thomas," I called after him. "We need to talk. Soon." He paused, looking back at me with conflicted eyes. "Later, Dad. I promise." But I had a sinking feeling that later would never come. After they left, I sat alone in the unfamiliar kitchen, sipping my coffee and trying to make sense of what was happening. I needed to understand the full scope of the situation before deciding how to respond. I explored the house, cataloging the changes. Every room had been transformed. My bedroom, the one I shared with Martha for 4 decades, was now occupied by Amanda's parents. Their clothes hung in our closet. Their toiletries lined the bathroom counter. The quilt Martha had made for our wedding bed was gone, replaced by a generic comforter I didn't recognize. In Thomas's old bedroom, now converted to a home office, I found boxes of papers. I wasn't proud of snooping, but I needed information. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Bank statements showing large withdrawals from an account I didn't recognize but had Thomas's name on it. Credit card bills for purchases that must have cost thousands. And a document that looked like preliminary paperwork for transferring property ownership, my property. I heard movement upstairs. Amanda's parents were awake. Not wanting to be caught, I quickly returned to the kitchen, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd found. Harold and Diane came downstairs together, stopping short when they saw me. "Good morning," I said politely. "Morning," Harold mumbled, looking uncomfortable. Diane eyed me suspiciously. "Amanda said you'd be staying in the garden house." "Garden shed," I corrected. "And yes, that appears to be my new accommodation. Though I do need to come in to use the bathroom and kitchen, seeing as the shed lacks those basic amenities." Harold had the decency to look embarrassed. "Look, Nelson, this isn't what we expected either. Amanda told us you had agreed to this arrangement." "Did she now?" I kept my tone neutral. "Interesting, considering I was never consulted." Diane shot her husband a warning look. "We're just trying to help our daughter and son-in-law. They said you needed assistance after your health scare." "I appreciate concern for my health," I said. Though I'm curious how moving me to an unheated shed with no bathroom is meant to aid my recovery. Harold looked away. Diane's lips thinned into a tight line. We should have breakfast, she said to her husband, effectively ending the conversation. I watched as they moved around my kitchen, opening cabinets and the refrigerator as if they owned the place. They didn't offer me food, and I didn't ask. Instead, I excused myself and returned to the shed to think. Throughout the day, I observed the house from my garden exile. Amanda came home for lunch, unusual for her, based on what Thomas had told me about her work schedule. She had a hushed conversation with her parents on the back patio, just out of earshot. I caught phrases like sign over and retirement community and best for everyone. They were planning to get rid of me. The realization should have shocked me, but somehow I wasn't surprised. I thought about confronting them directly, demanding my rightful place in my own home. But years of engineering work had taught me that the direct approach wasn't always the most effective. Sometimes you needed to understand all the structural weaknesses before you could build something that would last. I needed more information and a solid plan. Most of all, I needed an ally who understood the legal ramifications of what was happening. In the afternoon, I told Diane I was going for a short walk as part of my cardiac rehabilitation. She barely acknowledged me, too busy rearranging Martha's china cabinet. I walked slowly down the street to the bus stop, my hospital discharge papers and ID in my pocket. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in the office of Frank Wilson, my attorney of 40 years and one of my oldest friends. Jesus, Nelson, Frank said after I explained the situation. This is elder abuse. We should call the police. Not yet, I said. Thomas is still my son. He's being manipulated, but I don't want to see him in legal trouble. And Amanda? I have other plans for Amanda, I said, surprising myself with the calm determination in my voice. Frank leaned back in his chair, studying me. You can stay with Marge and me. We have the guest room. No need for you to live in a shed, for crying out loud. Thank you, but no, I said. If I leave now, I might never get my home back. I need to be there to handle this. Frank nodded slowly. What do you need from me? First, I need to confirm the house is still legally mine. Of course it is. You never added Thomas to the deed. Even after Martha passed, remember? We discussed it, but you decided to handle it in your will instead. Good. Second, I need to understand my options if this escalates. And third, I hesitated. I need you to help me look into Amanda's background. Something isn't right there. Frank raised an eyebrow. Playing detective now? Just being thorough, I said. Martha always said Amanda wasn't what she seemed. I should have listened sooner. As I left Frank's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since seeing Amanda at my door yesterday. Hope. I had built bridges that withstood hurricanes and floods. I could surely find a way to reclaim my own home and maybe even save my son in the process. I returned to find Thomas home early from work, sitting alone on the back patio. Perfect timing. Got a minute? I asked, taking the seat across from him. He glanced nervously toward the house. Amanda's inside with her parents. She doesn't want me talking to you alone. Says it'll upset you. Does that make sense to you, son? That talking to my own child would be harmful to me? Thomas looked down at his hands. The doctor said to avoid stress. The doctor didn't prescribe living in a garden shed or having strangers take over my house, I pointed out gently. Thomas, what's really going on here? He opened his mouth to respond, but the back door opened, and Amanda stepped out. There you are, she said to Thomas, her voice sweet but her eyes hard. Mom needs help moving something upstairs. Thomas stood immediately. We'll talk later, Dad. But the look Amanda gave me made it clear there would be no later. She was systematically cutting me off from my son. As they went inside, I stayed on the patio, watching the sun set over Martha's rose garden. I need your wisdom now, old girl, I whispered, imagining Martha sitting beside me as she had for so many evenings. How do I fight this without losing Thomas in the process? The roses didn't answer, of course, but as I sat there, A plan began to form in my mind. Amanda wanted a war for control of the house and Thomas, but I wouldn't give her a direct confrontation. No, I would be smarter than that. As Martha used to say, sometimes the quietest response speaks the loudest. The next morning, I emerged from the shed at dawn, washed up in the half-bathroom, and was sitting at the kitchen table with fresh coffee when Amanda and Thomas came down for breakfast. I had a pleasant smile fixed on my face. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. "Coffee's fresh if anyone wants some." Amanda looked suspicious of my upbeat demeanor. "We have to get to work," she said curtly. "Of course. Have a good day, both of you." I took a sip of coffee, still smiling. "Oh, Thomas, I found an old photo of you and your baseball team while organizing my things yesterday. State champions, 1997. Remember Coach Wilson?" Thomas paused, a flicker of the old warmth in his eyes. "Coach Wilson was the best. He came to every game after I went to college, remember?" "I do," I said. "Good man." Amanda cleared her throat loudly. "We're going to be late. Let's go." As they left, I maintained my pleasant demeanor, waving goodbye as if nothing was wrong. Through the window, I watched Amanda questioning Thomas in the driveway, clearly unsettled by my calm acceptance of the situation. Perfect. Step 1 complete. After they left, I took my cell phone into the garden and made several calls, careful to stay out of earshot of the house where Amanda's parents remained. First to Frank, asking him to move forward with our plans. Then to several other key people. When I returned to the house, Harold was alone in the kitchen, Diane apparently still upstairs. "Nelson," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Can I get you anything? More coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you," I said, maintaining my pleasant tone. "Beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect for gardening. Martha's roses need attention after I've been away." Harold shifted awkwardly. "Look, about the current situation." "No need to explain," I said, raising a hand. "Family is complicated. I understand you're just supporting your daughter." He looked relieved at my apparent acceptance, which only confirmed my suspicions that he wasn't fully comfortable with what was happening. "I think I'll work in the garden for a bit," I said. "Doctor said light activity is good for recovery." In the garden, I began carefully pruning Martha's roses, but my actions had another purpose. Using my phone, I documented the current state of the property, taking photos of the shed where I was staying, the changes to the house, even the boxes of my belongings piled in the garage that Amanda thought I didn't know about. Later, when Amanda and Thomas returned from work, I was again sitting calmly at the kitchen table, a photo album open before me. "How was work?" I asked pleasantly. Amanda ignored my question. "Why are you in here?" "Dinner's not for 2 hours. Just looking at some old family photos," I said. "Did you know Thomas was the youngest Eagle Scout in our district history? Such a determined boy." Thomas stepped closer, curious. "I haven't seen those pictures in years. Your mother was so proud that day," I said, pointing to a photo of a beaming Martha with her arm around a teenage Thomas. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the real Thomas, the son I raised. Amanda saw it too and quickly intervened. "Thomas, your father should be resting in his space." The doctor said to avoid excitement. "Looking at family photos is hardly exciting," I said mildly. "But I understand. I'll go back to the shed." I gathered the album and stood, giving Thomas a warm smile before heading out. As I passed Amanda, I added softly, "Lovely redecorating job, by the way. Very modern." The confusion on her face, as I walked away peacefully, was exactly what I wanted. She expected anger, confrontation, a scene that would make me look unstable and reinforce her narrative that I needed to be removed from the house. My calm acceptance was throwing her off balance. Over the next few days, I maintained this approach. Pleasant, calm, seemingly accepting of the situation, while systematically gathering information and implementing my plan. I made a point of having brief, warm interactions with Thomas whenever possible, usually centered around positive memories or simple questions about his day. Nothing controversial, nothing that would give Amanda reason to intervene. With Harold and Diane, I was unfailingly polite, even helpful. When Harold struggled to find the circuit breaker after blowing a fuse, I showed him without complaint. When Diane mentioned she couldn't figure out how to work the garden hose, I demonstrated with a smile. Each interaction seemed to make them more uncomfortable with the situation, especially Harold. Meanwhile, Frank was making progress on our investigation. Amanda had a history. 2 previous marriages, both to men with significant assets, both ending in acrimonious divorces that somehow left her financially secure. There were complaints filed by both ex-husbands alleging financial manipulation, though nothing had come of them legally. Most concerning was a pattern of isolating her partners from friends and family. One ex-mother-in-law had even filed for a wellness check on her son, claiming Amanda had cut off all family contact. The picture becoming clearer, I began the next phase of my plan. I arranged for a chance encounter between Thomas and his childhood best friend Michael, whom Amanda had systematically pushed out of their lives over the past few years. I ran into Michael at the pharmacy, I told Thomas innocently one evening. He asked about you, said he's tried calling several times. Really? Thomas looked surprised. I never got any messages. Phones are tricky things, I said mildly. Anyway, he's having a small gathering this weekend. Some of the old baseball team asked if you'd like to come. Before Thomas could respond, Amanda interjected. He can't. We have plans with my parents. Actually, I said, Harold mentioned they're visiting your aunt this weekend. Something about helping with her move? Amanda's face registered shock that I'd spoken to her father enough to know their plans. Thomas looked at Amanda. I haven't seen the guys in ages. Maybe just for an hour? The crack in Amanda's control was tiny but real. I hid my satisfaction behind a neutral expression. The next day, I received a text from my old neighbor Eleanor, Thomas's honorary aunt and Martha's best friend. Amanda had refused to let her visit after Martha's funeral, effectively cutting her out of our lives. Package delivered, the text read, along with an address. Perfect. That evening, I mentioned casually to Thomas that I had a doctor's follow-up and would be taking a taxi into town the next day. I can drive you, Thomas offered, sounding like his old self. No need to take time off work, I said. The taxi is fine, but thank you, son. The next day, my doctor's appointment was actually a meeting with Eleanor, who had been busy making calls to everyone in Thomas's life, whom Amanda had pushed away, old friends, cousins, former colleagues. Each had similar stories of unreturned calls, canceled plans, and eventually lost contact. It's like she systematically erased everyone who cared about him, Eleanor said, her eyes filling with tears. Martha would be heartbroken. Martha saw through her from the start, I said. I should have listened. What can I do? Eleanor asked. I explained my plan, and she agreed immediately. As the week progressed, I continued my strategy of calm acceptance, while systematically documenting everything and strengthening my legal position. I discovered that Amanda had been hiding my mail, including important medical documents and a letter from an old colleague offering Thomas a job opportunity that would have taken him out of Amanda's control. I said nothing, adding these discoveries to my growing file with Frank. The time wasn't right yet for confrontation. Amanda was growing increasingly agitated by my calm demeanor. I overheard her complaining to her mother. He's up to something. He should be angry, fighting back. This pleasant act is weird, Diane responded. Maybe he's just accepted the situation. Makes things easier for us. I don't trust it, Amanda said. We need to speed up the timeline. That night, I lay on my cot in the shed, reviewing my plan. The foundation was in place. The structure was sound. Now I just needed to add the final elements before revealing the true design. 1 week since coming home from the hospital, and I was finally ready to reclaim what was mine. Day 7 of my return from the hospital marked the beginning of what I privately called Phase 2. The doorbell rang precisely at 10 in the morning, just as arranged. I was working in the garden, within earshot of the front door, when Diane answered. Can I help you? I heard her ask. I'm looking for Thomas Walker, a familiar female voice responded. I'm Eleanor Ryan, his aunt. I smiled to myself, continuing to prune roses as if unaware of the visitor. "Thomas isn't home," Diane said stiffly. "He's at work, and I don't recall him mentioning an aunt." Eleanor's laugh was warm and genuine. "Well, not by blood, but I've known that boy since he was born. I was his mother's best friend for 40 years. I rounded the corner of the house just then, wiping my hands on my gardening towel. "Ellie, what a wonderful surprise." Eleanor turned, her face lighting up with genuine affection. "Nelson, look at you, gardening already after your heart attack. Martha would have a fit." We embraced, and I could feel Diane's eyes boring into us. Come in," I insisted. "I want to hear everything about your trip to Europe." Diane stepped forward. "I'm sorry, but we're in the middle of some renovations. It's not a good time for visitors." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, looking past Diane to the perfectly clean living room. "Renovations? Looks finished to me. And I've brought something special." She held up a large photo album. "Found these while cleaning out my attic. Photos of Thomas growing up that Martha had given me copies of. Thought his father might want them." Diane looked trapped between social propriety and Amanda's instructions. Social propriety won. I suppose a short visit would be fine. "I'm Diane, Amanda's mother." "Lovely to meet you," Eleanor said sweetly, though I could see the steel behind her smile. Eleanor had been Martha's fiercest defender in life. Now she was continuing that role in death. We settled in the living room, deliberately looking through photos that highlighted the deep family connections Amanda had tried to sever. Stories of Thomas's childhood, Martha's garden parties, family holidays. Eleanor was masterful, weaving a narrative of long-standing family bonds while making it impossible for Diane to object without seeming cruel. The coup de grace came when Eleanor innocently asked, "Where's Thomas living now? I have a few things of Martha's I saved for him." "He lives here," I said, watching Diane carefully, "with Amanda and, now, her parents. In this big, beautiful house Nelson built with his own hands for Martha." "How lovely that you're keeping it in the family," Eleanor said, her emphasis subtle but unmistakable. I could see the discomfort on Diane's face growing. Perfect. When Eleanor left, promising to return with more family memorabilia, Diane immediately called Amanda. I pretended to return to gardening but positioned myself where I could overhear. Some woman named Eleanor showed up. Claims to be Thomas's aunt. Very friendly with Nelson. Talking about family history and how Nelson built this house. "I think you should come home early." By the time Amanda arrived home, looking flustered and angry, I was sitting peacefully in the kitchen, cooking dinner. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of me using her kitchen. My friend Eleanor stopped by. I said pleasantly before she could speak. "Brought some family photos for Thomas." I left them on his desk. "We had an agreement," Amanda snapped. "No visitors without clearing it with me first." "Did we?" I asked mildly. "I don't recall agreeing to that. Eleanor is welcome in my home any time, as she has been for 40 years. Amanda's face flushed with anger. "This isn't just your home anymore." "No?" I raised an eyebrow. "Whose name is on the deed, Amanda?" Before she could respond, Thomas walked in, looking tired from his workday. "Thomas." Amanda immediately turned to him. "Your father had some woman over today, disrupting everything. She claimed to be your aunt. Aunt Ellie was here?" Thomas's face lit up genuinely for the first time since my return. "I haven't seen her in years. Is she coming back?" The look of confusion on Amanda's face was priceless. Her careful work of isolating Thomas was beginning to unravel. "She brought some old family photos," I said. "Left them in your office. She mentioned something about a small dinner gathering tomorrow with some old friends. Michael, I think, and a few others from the baseball team." "Really?" Thomas looked excited, then hesitant, glancing at Amanda. "We have plans tomorrow," Amanda said quickly. "No, we don't." Thomas frowned. "You said you wanted a quiet night at home." "Well, I don't feel comfortable with you going off with people I don't know," Amanda insisted. Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "You do know them. Michael was my best man at our wedding, and you've met Aunt Ellie multiple times." A small crack in Amanda's control. exactly as planned. That evening, while Amanda and her parents were occupied with a movie in the living room, I left a small journal on Thomas's desk, partially hidden under the photos Eleanor had brought. The journal contained entries I'd written over the past week, not angry accusations, but reflections on my love for my son, memories of our time together, and my hopes for his happiness. Subtle observations about Amanda's controlling behavior, but framed as concerns rather than attacks. The seeds of doubt, planted carefully. The next day marked the beginning of the end for Amanda's scheme. As arranged, Thomas received texts from several old friends, all coincidentally reaching out on the same day. Then a call from his favorite cousin, who happened to be in town. Each connection Amanda had severed was being carefully restored. Meanwhile, Frank had completed his investigation into Amanda's background and financial activities. The evidence was disturbing. Not only had she systematically isolated Thomas from everyone who cared about him, but she had also been transferring their joint funds to private accounts in her name only. Most concerning was a draft power of attorney document on her computer, ready to declare me incompetent after my heart attack. The dinner gathering Eleanor organized was the turning point. Despite Amanda's objections, Thomas insisted on attending, saying he would only be gone a couple of hours. It was the first time he'd directly defied her in years. While he was gone, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I asked Harold to help me fix a loose board on the shed steps, a small request that separated him from Amanda and Diane. "Harold," I said quietly as we worked, "I know this is an uncomfortable position for you." He looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "Being asked to participate in taking over a man's home after he's had a heart attack. It can't sit well with someone who seems to have a conscience." Harold's face reddened. "Amanda said you wanted to downsize, that you'd agreed to move to a retirement community. Did she?" I kept my tone conversational. "Interesting. And did it seem likely that I'd choose to live in an unheated shed as an intermediate step?" Harold looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Diane and I should never have agreed to this. But Amanda insisted you were on board, just temporarily overwhelmed by your health issues." "I see," I said. "And now that you know that's not true?" Harold sighed heavily. "Diane won't go against Amanda. They're too alike. And you?" He met my eyes finally. "I don't want any part of stealing an old man's home. But I don't know how to fix this without causing a family explosion. Sometimes a controlled demolition is necessary before rebuilding," I said. "I'm giving Amanda one chance to correct course. After that, I have documentation of everything that's happened here. Financial records, witness statements, medical documentation, proving I'm fully competent. I'm prepared to use it all if necessary." Harold paled. "You'd take legal action against your own son?" "Against Amanda," I clarified. "I believe Thomas is as much a victim here as I am. But I won't be forced out of my home or separated from my son. So you have a choice to make, Harold. Which side of this are you going to be on when everything comes to light?" I left him with that thought, returning to the house just as Thomas arrived home from dinner, looking more animated and alive than I'd seen him in years. The final catalyst came the next morning. While searching for his work shoes, Thomas found the medications the hospital had sent home with me. Medications Amanda had hidden rather than giving to me as instructed. His medical background as a former EMT made him immediately recognize the seriousness of this discovery. I was in the garden when I heard the shouting from inside the house. Then the back door slammed open, and Thomas stormed out, face flushed with anger, Amanda following close behind. "You hid his heart medication?" Thomas was shouting, holding the pill bottles. "Do you understand how dangerous that is? He could have had another heart attack." "I was organizing it," Amanda insisted, her voice shrill. "I was going to give it to him today. It's been a week." "The discharge instructions said to start these immediately." Thomas turned to me, his expression stricken. "Dad, I had no idea. I swear." "I know, son," I said calmly. "You're overreacting," Amanda said, trying to regain control. "Nelson is fine. By luck, not thanks to you." Thomas shot back. "What else have you been hiding from me?" The confrontation escalated as Thomas, now alert to Amanda's manipulation, began questioning everything. Why had his friends stopped calling? Why had family visits suddenly become inconvenient? Why was his father living in a shed after building this house with his own hands? With each question, Amanda's explanations grew more desperate and contradictory. Thomas turned to me, really seeing me for the first time since my return. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never agreed to any of this. Amanda told me you had agreed to temporary arrangements while we sorted out better accommodations." "I never agreed to anything," I said simply. "I came home from the hospital to find myself exiled from my own house." Amanda's parents had emerged to witness the confrontation. Diane looked defensive, but Harold's expression was resigned, even shameful. "Thomas," Amanda tried one last manipulation, tears filling her eyes. "Your father is trying to come between us. After everything I've done for this family, what exactly have you done?" Thomas demanded. "Besides redecorate the house my father built? Besides hide his medication? Besides lie to me about conversations that never happened?" "I've been protecting you," Amanda shouted, losing control. "He's old. He's going to die soon anyway. This house should be ours." The shocked silence that followed her outburst said everything. Thomas stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" Amanda looked stunned. "Get out of my father's house," Thomas repeated, his voice stronger. "Now, take your parents and go to a hotel. I'll have your things sent over." "You can't do this," Amanda sputtered. "I'm your wife." "And he's my father," Thomas said firmly. "The man who raised me, who built this house for our family. I've been blind, but I'm seeing clearly now." He turned to Amanda's parents. "I'm sorry, but you need to leave too." Diane began to protest, but Harold took her arm. "He's right, Diane. We never should have been part of this." He looked at me. "I truly am sorry, Nelson." "I appreciate that, Harold," I said simply. As Amanda continued to protest, Thomas called a taxi for her and her parents. "You have 24 hours to find other accommodations," he informed them. "After that, I'll have a lawyer contact you about the divorce." The word divorce seemed to finally penetrate Amanda's rage. Her face went white. "You can't be serious. After everything we've built together?" "What exactly have we built?" Thomas asked sadly. "A marriage based on manipulation and lies? You hid my father's heart medication, Amanda. You could have killed him. What kind of person does that?" As the taxi arrived and Amanda's parents gathered some immediate necessities, Amanda made one last desperate attempt, turning to me with tears streaming down her face. "Nelson, please, tell Thomas this is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out as a family." I looked at the woman who had tried to steal my home, who had hidden my medication, who had systematically cut my son off from everyone who loved him. "Goodbye, Amanda," I said simply. As they drove away, Thomas turned to me, his eyes filled with shame and regret. "Dad, I don't know how to make this right. I let her manipulate me, blind me to what was happening. I failed you, and Mom." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You didn't fail, son. You were targeted by someone skilled at manipulation. But when it mattered most, you saw the truth and did the right thing. That's all Martha and I ever taught you to do." Together, we walked back into our home, truly ours once again, and began the process of healing and rebuilding. The days after Amanda and her parents left were both painful and healing, like cleaning an infected wound. Thomas and I talked more openly than we had in years, working through the manipulation and isolation that had nearly destroyed our relationship. "I still can't believe I let it happen," Thomas said as we sat on the porch swing Martha had loved so much. "Looking back, I can see how she gradually cut me off from everyone. A canceled dinner here, a lost phone message there, until it was just her. That's how manipulation works," I explained gently. "It's so gradual you don't see it happening until you're already trapped." Thomas helped me move back into my bedroom, carefully returning things to their proper places. Amanda had stored most of our family items in the attic or garage rather than discarding them, probably planning to sell them later. Finding Martha's quilt brought tears to both our eyes. Thomas carefully spread it over my bed, smoothing the fabric Martha had so lovingly pieced together. "I remember Mom working on this," he said softly. "Summer evenings on the porch, telling me stories while she sewed. She put so much love into everything she did," I agreed. "She would have fought like a lion to protect you from Amanda." Thomas nodded, wiping his eyes. "I know. I should have listened when she said she had concerns about Amanda. Mom always could read people." The process of legally disentangling Thomas from Amanda began immediately. Frank helped us file for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse and put a freeze on all joint accounts after discovering Amanda had been systematically draining them. "She's done this before," Frank told us, showing the results of his investigation. 2 previous marriages, both to men with significant assets, both ending with her in control of substantial funds. "Should we press charges?" Thomas asked. "For hiding Dad's medication? For elder abuse?" I considered this carefully. What would it achieve? More conflict, more stress. I have my home and my son back. That's what matters to me. But we did take precautions. Frank helped us secure a restraining order after Amanda made several attempts to enter the house when Thomas was at work. She vacillated between tearful pleas for reconciliation and venomous threats about ruining us both. Classic behavior of a narcissist who's lost control, Eleanor observed when she came to help us restore the house to its former warmth. She can't stand that her manipulation failed. Eleanor had become a regular visitor again, bringing home-cooked meals and moral support. Thomas's old friends also returned to our lives, the barriers Amanda had erected now demolished. Michael, Thomas's childhood best friend, stopped by often to help with house projects. "Man, I tried calling you for 2 years," he told Thomas. "Always got some excuse from Amanda about why you couldn't talk or meet up. Eventually, I figured you just didn't want me around anymore." "I never knew you called," Thomas said, the pain evident in his voice. She would tell me no one had reached out. As the weeks passed, we established a new routine. Thomas continued working at his engineering firm, but came home for dinner every night. We would sit on the porch afterward, talking about everything and nothing, rebuilding the bond that Amanda had nearly destroyed. Amanda made one final desperate attempt at reconciliation about a month after leaving. She arrived unannounced, dressed in the outfit she'd worn on their first date, carrying Thomas's favorite takeout food. Thomas met her on the porch, refusing to let her inside. I watched from the window as he stood firm against her tears and manipulations. "It's over, Amanda," I heard him say. "I filed for divorce. The papers will be delivered to your attorney tomorrow." "You can't do this to me," she cried, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "After everything I've done for you." "That's the problem," Thomas replied calmly. "Everything you did was about control, not love. I didn't see it then, but I see it clearly now." When her tears failed to move him, Amanda's demeanor changed instantly, her face hardening into a mask of rage. "You'll regret this. Both of you will. Nobody leaves me." "I just did," Thomas said, turning to go back inside. "Goodbye, Amanda." Her final desperate act was to claim I had dementia and couldn't live independently, filing for an emergency competency hearing. Thanks to Frank's foresight, we were prepared. My doctor testified to my complete mental competence, and Eleanor and other friends provided statements about my clear-headed behavior. The judge dismissed the case immediately and warned Amanda about filing frivolous claims. After that, she finally disappeared from our lives, moving to another state, according to the gossip Eleanor picked up. Thomas's divorce was finalized 3 months later, giving him a fresh start. The experience changed him. He became more confident, more discerning about people's true intentions. He reconnected with old friends and family, rebuilding the support network Amanda had systematically dismantled. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset over Martha's roses, Thomas turned to me. "Thank you, Dad." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For fighting for our family when I was too blind to see what was happening." I patted his hand. "That's what parents do, son. We keep loving, keep hoping, even when it seems impossible. I've been thinking about what Mom would say about all this, Thomas said, looking out at the garden. I smiled, feeling Martha's presence between us as we sat on her favorite porch swing. She'd say, "I told you so. First of all, your mother never missed a chance to point out when she was right." Thomas laughed. "True. And then she'd say what she always said. That family is the most precious thing we have, worth fighting for with everything we've got." As the summer turned to fall, our home and our lives returned to normal. Or rather, a new normal, stronger for having been tested. The house once again felt like the home Martha and I had built, filled with warmth and memories. Thomas started dating again, cautiously. He brought a woman named Sarah to dinner one evening, a kindergarten teacher with a kind smile and genuine warmth. I watched them interact, saw how she listened when he spoke, how she engaged me in conversation about Martha's garden, so different from Amanda's calculated charm. "What do you think?" Thomas asked after she left. "I think your mother would approve," I said simply. He nodded, understanding all that statement contained. 6 months after my return from the hospital, my health had fully recovered. The garden bloomed again under our care, Thomas and I working side by side, as we had when he was a boy. The shed returned to its proper purpose, storing tools instead of a displaced old man. Most importantly, Thomas and I had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of truth and trust. The manipulation that had nearly destroyed our family had ultimately made us stronger, more aware of what truly mattered. "We survived the storm," I told Martha's photo one evening, "just like you always said we would." And somewhere, I felt sure she was smiling. It has been a full year since I walked out of that hospital to find my home and family under siege. The seasons have completed their cycle. Martha's roses have bloomed and faded and bloomed again, and life has settled into a rhythm that feels both familiar and new. Thomas and I have found our way back to each other, our bond stronger for having been tested. He visits daily, even though he moved into his own apartment downtown 6 months ago. "I needed my own space," he explained, "but not at the cost of our relationship." I understood. After Amanda's suffocating control, he needed to establish his independence again. Sarah, the kindergarten teacher, is now a regular visitor to our Sunday dinners. She brings homemade pies and genuine laughter to our table. Last week, I caught Thomas looking at engagement rings online. When he saw me noticing, he just smiled and said, "This time I'm doing it right, Dad. Taking it slow, making sure it's real." The physical traces of Amanda's brief reign over our home have been erased. The cold, modern furniture is gone, replaced by pieces that tell our family story. Martha's quilts drape over chair backs, family photos line the walls again, and her reading corner has been restored, though now it's often Thomas who sits there with a book and a cup of coffee. Frank still checks in regularly, both as my attorney and my friend. "Never thought I'd see you playing detective at 70, he joked recently. "You missed your calling, Nelson." "I didn't miss my calling," I told him. "I built bridges. And when it mattered most, I rebuilt the most important one of all, the connection to my son." This experience taught me lessons I never expected to learn at my age. About manipulation and how it works its way into relationships, so gradually the victim doesn't realize they're being controlled. About the remarkable human capacity for self-deception when we want badly enough to believe in something or someone. About the quiet strength that comes from responding strategically rather than reacting emotionally. Amanda targeted Thomas because she saw in him what I had always seen: a good heart, a trusting nature, and the financial security that came from our family's hard work. What she failed to understand was that those same qualities, kindness, trust, integrity, would ultimately lead him to recognize and reject her manipulation. I've thought often about what made my approach successful when direct confrontation would likely have failed. I believe it was patience. In an age of immediate reactions, of anger and accusation, patience has become a rare and powerful tool. By observing, documenting, and strategically responding rather than emotionally reacting, I was able to help Thomas see the truth for himself. That's the key, I think. You can tell someone the truth until you're blue in the face, but they have to see it with their own eyes to truly believe it. All I did was create the conditions for Thomas to recognize what was happening. The strength to break free came from within him. Thomas has grown through this experience in ways that make me profoundly proud. The naive trust that made him vulnerable to Amanda has been replaced by a more discerning understanding of human nature. Yet he hasn't become cynical or bitter. If anything, he appreciates genuine connections more deeply now, having experienced their counterfeit. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't had that heart attack," he said to me recently. "Amanda might have succeeded in isolating me completely. I might never have seen the truth." "Life has a way of delivering the challenges we need," I told him, "even when they come disguised as disasters." And that's perhaps the most important lesson in all of this. The heart attack that seemed like the worst possible timing turned out to be precisely what our family needed. It accelerated Amanda's plan, making her manipulation visible when it might otherwise have continued undetected for years. Martha used to say that there are no accidents in life, only opportunities disguised as problems. As I tend her roses, now thriving again under proper care, I think about how right she was. My health crisis became the catalyst for healing a much deeper, more dangerous disease that had infected our family. I've made peace with what happened. I hold no hatred for Amanda, though I maintain healthy boundaries against any future contact. Hatred would only give her continued power over my life. Instead, I focus on gratitude for the second chance with my son, for the wisdom gained, for the restored warmth of our family home. Thomas asked me once if I regretted not taking legal action against Amanda for elder abuse or theft. Wouldn't justice have felt better? He wondered. Justice isn't always found in a courtroom, I told him. Sometimes it's in the quiet restoration of what matters most. I have my son back. I have my home. That's all the justice I needed. As for Amanda, last we heard she had moved to Arizona and was already engaged to another man with considerable assets. I pray he sees through her manipulation before experiencing what our family endured. But that's his journey, not ours. Our journey continues here, in the home Martha and I built, in the garden we planted together, in the family bonds that proved stronger than the forces trying to break them apart. Thomas is dating a woman who genuinely cares for him and respects his relationship with me. I'm healthy again, my heart strong enough for whatever challenges life brings next. If there's wisdom I could share from this experience, it would be this. True strength often lies in strategic patience rather than immediate reaction. Document everything, but fight only the battles that truly matter. Recognize that manipulators gain power through isolation. Keep your connections to family and friends strong. And perhaps most importantly, trust that even in your darkest moments, the light of truth will eventually break through. Life at 70 looks different than I imagined when Martha was still by my side. There's an empty space that will never be filled. But there's also a hard-won peace that comes from weathering storms and emerging stronger. Thomas and I survived Amanda's attempt to tear apart our family because the foundation was solid, even when the structure seemed threatened. Like those bridges I spent my career building, relationships require regular maintenance and occasional major repairs. But when built with integrity from the beginning, they can withstand forces that might destroy weaker connections. I wonder now, have you ever faced manipulation in your own life? Did you recognize it while it was happening, or only in retrospect? What helped you break free? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story helped you see your own situation more clearly, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more life lessons from someone who's been around the block a few times. Share this with someone who might need to hear that even when things look darkest, there's always a path back to light. Thank you for listening to an old man's tale of family, betrayal, and the quiet power of standing your ground. May you find the strength to protect what matters most in your own life.